I just finished reading 13 Perfect Fugitives, a book about the Gardner Museum heist in Boston, which is one of the biggest art thefts in history. My name is Adam, and I'm on a quest to become the most prolific reviewer of all time. And this is a review of 13 Perfect Fugitives, the true story of the mob, murder, and the world's largest art heist. I didn't like the book, which is unfortunate because the actual story is fascinating. In 1990, two men dressed as police officers walked into the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston and walked out with 13 works of art, paintings by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Degas, and to this day, the paintings haven't been recovered. So that's an incredible story. Unfortunately, I think the book about it is much less interesting than the crime itself. The author was an FBI agent who worked on the case years after the original investigation. And the central argument of the book is basically that the FBI has figured out who committed the crime. There's one particular group of suspects they believe were responsible. And I have to say, he makes a pretty convincing case. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say I'm about 75% uh, convinced that he's right. The problem is, though, they don't have the paintings, and they've never found them. In fact, the FBI focused heavily on one particular suspect for something like 12 years. They searched his property multiple times, they investigated him extensively, and he maintained that he didn't have the paintings. And they never found them. So at some point, I think you have to acknowledge that there is a difference between a really good theory and actually solving a crime. The author seems to think that the case is essentially solved, but if the world's most famous stolen paintings are still missing, I'm not really sure that you can say that you've solved it. You have a very compelling theory, you don't have the paintings. And that's a pretty important distinction. What bothered me even more was the author's attitude towards evidence that didn't fit his theory. He comes across as incredibly confident that he and the FBI are right. And I understand that investigators have to evaluate evidence. You can't treat every rumor or random piece of information as equally credible. Uh, but the tone of the book can be extremely condescending because, again, they don't have the paintings. They haven't actually solved the crime. It's basically, we know what happened, we know who did it, and if the evidence doesn't agree with us, well, the evidence is probably wrong. Except, except, they didn't find the paintings. Of course. So maybe we should just leave a tiny bit of room for doubt. There's another thing that really annoyed me. The author's discuss This is a personal pet peeve of mine. The author's discussion of lie detectors. At one point, the main suspect takes a polygraph test and fails, and the book treats this like meaningful evidence, but lie detectors aren't some magical machine that detects whether you're telling the truth. They measure physiological responses associated with stress and arousal. You can be stressed and telling the truth. You can be stressed and lying. You can be calm and lying. And you can be calm and telling the truth. And lie detector evidence is not used in court. So when someone says you need a really good operator to interpret the results, I'm thinking, okay, but then how scientific do you think that is? If I put 2 plus 2 into a calculator, I don't need a world class mathematician to interpret the answer. It's 4. obviously. If the result of your supposedly scientific test depends heavily on someone being exceptionally good at interpreting it, that's a pretty big problem. And if you can't use it as evidence in court, don't use it as evidence in your book. And there's another thing that I understand but still found irritating. The book is written by a former FBI agent, and he really, really likes FBI agents. Every time someone new from the FBI gets introduced, it's basically like, this guy was great. This woman was a professional. He was fantastic. She was incredibly confident. This guy was one of the best. He was a wonderful agent. Okay, we get it. You like the FBI. You're loyal to the FBI. The FBI, of course, has some good employees, excellent employees. I'm sure that's true. It's a huge organization. There are probably incredibly competent people there, and there are probably less competent people there, just like literally every other large organization on Earth. And I'm sure many of the people the author worked with were very good at their jobs. But this isn't a recruitment brochure for the FBI. This is a book about an art heist that, as I said, they still haven't found the paintings. You don't have to tell me how wonderful everybody is every 5 pages. Now, there is one thing I did genuinely like about the book. I really did like this. The author used to be a writer for Comedy Central, apparently, and you can actually see that background come through occasionally in some of the humor that's displayed in the book. There's some funny moments, and I do appreciate that. And I think that made me wish the entire book had been written with a little more humor and self-awareness, because the underlying story is incredible. 13 priceless works of art are stolen. The the thieves disappear, the paintings disappear, decades go by, and nobody except for the people who did the crime knows where they are. That's an amazing mystery. And I think the title is actually a pretty clever idea. The 13 Perfect Fugitives aren't the people who stole the paintings. They're the paintings themselves. They don't need to run away. They don't need fake passports. They don't need plastic surgery. They just need to disappear. Um, and they've done an incredibly good job of it, as I said before. The problem is that the book seems to want to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to tell us that this mystery has basically been solved while simultaneously admitting that the central pieces of evidence, the actual paintings, are still missing. And that's where I couldn't quite get on board. Again, I think the author's theory might actually be correct. Um, as I said, I'm probably 75% convinced, but 75% isn't 100%. And when you're talking about one of the biggest art thefts in history, I think you need to be a little more comfortable with saying, we don't know. We have this really good theory that fits, but we actually haven't proven it. Instead, the book often feels extremely confident about something that has never actually been proven, because again, you don't have the paintings. And for me, the confidence became more irritating than convincing. So 13 Perfect Fugitives is gets a very interesting subject, a fascinating central mystery, a few genuinely funny moments, but ultimately I don't think it was a very good book. The crime itself, fascinating. The theory, pretty convincing. The book, not so much. Not so much, unfortunately. The paintings, still gone, still missing. So I'm going to give the book 4 out of 10. That's my rating. If you've read the book, leave your comments in the comment section down below. If you know where the paintings are, put that also in the comment section. If you like what I do, if you want to help me on my quest to becoming the most prolific reviewer of all time, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Trying to break the big 30, the 30 subscriber mark. Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.